So,
Yes. Thank you all for being here. We wanted to begin by inviting you all into this gathering space. You'll see a blanket fort. You'll see a campfire made of an electric fan and some cardboard and some streamers. And something that feels really important to me to just in terms of creating a space today is to identify and acknowledge just how real life this is. Our city mayor is here, high school students, city councilors, community members from all walks of life are here to celebrate and share in the work that we had all done together. So we're going to return to this space and we're going to tell you a little bit in terms of how we got here, the steps we took, how we went about our process, and some of its impacts in the years since.
thank you. So this is a quote. Maybe many of you are familiar with Peter Block, but this quote has been one that has in my experience in the past 20 years, I've seen it. It feels very true and it rings very true. And I think that this last piece around how we have all we need in order to create alternative futures is sort of one of the driving forces behind this work. So I just wanted to start with that quote. And we'll do a quick kind of introduction of who we are. So this work took place in the spring and summer and fall of 2019. And I have been doing graphic facilitation work, which is sort of what you see me. This is me standing at the wall drawing, and kind of process design for large group collaborative work for about 20 something years, and learned that very much from my parents, and worked with my parents in that space for a long time, and have done most of that work outside of the place I lived. And so when I had traveled internationally a lot and done a lot of work in corporate space, but also in nonprofit and multi-stakeholder spaces globally. And there was a moment when I had a child and was realizing that I didn't have those same connections in the place that I lived, and also wanted to test out, what does this look like? All this stuff I've learned, what does it look like if we play with it here in the place that I actually live and I'm raising a family? So, and there were sort of a number of factors that coalesced, but that's who I was at that moment in this time.
Yeah, and it's funny, I'm wearing a very similar shirt, and I'm in the same space as I am in that picture. But yeah, so I'm an artist. I'm a painter. I'm a public muralist. I make floating sculptures. Being an artist has been very central to how I've lived my life. I unexpectedly became the director of a nonprofit organization. It was a community-based bike shop in New York City. I did that for many years, and that really took my creative approach and my approach to community engagement, and it just really deepened and expanded its scale. And I moved to Western Massachusetts 7 years ago and became the arts and culture program director for a very small city, Easthampton, Massachusetts. And we'll talk a little bit more about Easthampton. It is, I endearingly call it a little city with a great big heart. It only has 16,000 people. So I think of it sometimes almost like a college campus. It's very small. In certain ways, it's very accessible, but in other ways, people are often very disconnected from one another and culturally and otherwise. This is a little snapshot of where we live and where we are. We're actually in Eastworks, this bottom left slide here right now. It's an old mill town. We have arts and culture really integrated throughout our community. And that's one of the things I find most impactful about the work that I do here in Easthampton, is that while we do have a few art galleries here and there, it's really about partnering with the ice cream shop to make poetry programming happen. We run street festivals. We're in a beautiful setting. This center photo of the mountain and the pond, it's right downtown in our business district. So it's very small, but very vital. And we were at a particularly important moment in the city in terms of this work, because we were 11 years past the city's last municipal plan. And so we felt that it was important to really identify what we wanted for the future of arts and culture for the next 10 years. And our city demographically and economically is changing very, very rapidly. It's being gentrified very quickly. And we all understood that if we don't choose to preserve the arts and culture that we have, it's not a guarantee that it will be here. So we really wanted to put it right into the city's next master plan. And we thought this could be an incredible opportunity to do it in a way that really undermines all of our assumptions of what municipal engagement can look like, and do it in a way that could really access people's experiences, their wants, their dreams, to identify what's challenging to them, and to do this in a truly integrated way, and to, bring it forth into the city of Easthampton.
I think, and one other thing about the moment in time is that we also, there are a lot of relationships that had been established and built that enabled this to happen. I think very close relationships that I had with the mayor and with the city planner, and a lot of trust and a little bit of exposure to similar things. So I think that also helped in kind of setting the stage for what we did together. I think one of the things that I found really, many things was really exciting and that we really played with a lot was the teaming and the different groups that were part of this effort. So we had a core team that was the core facilitation team. We had a design team, which in this slide deck, actually, we call the community catalysts, who were core stakeholders from the community who were identified as really critical in getting
not right now.
their support and sorry. And so they had been identified as sort of anchors in the community who we really wanted to have at before we even started to get their ideas and input. We had an advisory council that was made up of people nationally, internationally, of people I had worked with and trusted for decades and who we used as thinking partners. And then a facilitation team of people who was comprised of people who are from here, Easthampton, and also not from here. And so we intentionally did a mix of bringing different perspectives in really intentionally. And so there was a core group that was participating throughout, and then we had people who came at each stage. So there was always new perspective, which also required that we did a lot of storytelling and synthesizing about what we had been doing. So just naming the many people involved in this project.
And so the way that this project worked, we, as Sita just mentioned, we assembled a team of local stakeholders. And while Easthampton's very small, there is a population of people who literally used to work in these mill buildings that don't function as mill buildings anymore. They've been mostly converted into artist studios and creative businesses. But it felt really important that if we're going to be adding this to a master plan, that we really are able to access as many demographics within our community as possible. And so part of that was, generational. It's like we talked to school teachers, getting youth involved. We talked to the Council on Aging. We talked to veterans. We talked to artists. So we assembled a team of people who were connected to all these different areas and who could really, from the very get-go, represent those voices. We had local business owners, landlords, renters, in many different forms. We really wanted to make sure those bases were covered so that we were approaching this holistically. We knew that we really care about arts and culture, but because it's so integrated in the city and because we want it to continue to be so integrated into the city, making sure we have a real range of diverse perspectives in the room felt really key from the start.
One of the things that was really critical coming out of that initial group of the community catalyst was a set of guiding principles that we used to really inform the work we did moving forward. So these that are listed here became really core in not only the way that we worked together, but the what and the actual designs themselves of the different stages of the process. So we were really focused on designing for relationship, for collective ownership of this, so that everyone who participated could really feel like they had a direct input and say over what happened, and then had ownership and excitement about it. Diversity was a very big challenge in a way, because we realized that, that would have been to get the entire diverse community present in the sessions was a lot of work, I'd say, and that was a big learning there. But part of that also meant diversity of ways of engaging in this. So we recognized that there were many different pathways to engage community members. So I'm not going to read through all of them, but these became really core in the work that we did. Just to give you a sense of the flow. So we had some of the early conversations in April with those community catalysts. In May, we had our first session. We had 3 sort of central sessions that were around, the first one was around sensing and discovery. So just understanding who was here, what is here, kind of the getting the lay of the land and understanding what's possible. The second session was in early June 1st, where we did a lot of prototyping. We played with different scenarios. We tested ideas, checked on kind of interdependencies across other different chapters of the master plan. So economic development, housing, all of the different other adjacent spaces. The third session was in end of June and was focused on kind of the action piece of deciding together of what were the priorities and what did we want to put forward as kind of key strategies. And we had a lot in that session. We did a lot of perspective taking from many different stakeholders. And then in September, so between June and September, we synthesized the output from all of that work. And as we go through, there are QR codes on each slide. There is a massive amount of documentation. So we've picked some pictures, but if you are curious to see more, you can see that. But in September, we had a celebration where we had a meal and music, and we had a blanket fort, and it was great. So we'll get through each of these pieces, but that's the sort of flow of the public sessions.
Yeah, so we were in a gigantic space, and we realized, and Sita and many folks from her team just did an incredible job creating a space that when people walked in, there was immediately this innate and not conscious sense of wonder, of just, where am I? Like, what is this? And I found, looking back, that was really, really important, that people arrived open, and that physical space was definitely a part of that. One of the things that we felt was really important in terms of talking about, who we are, what we want, part of that is identifying the strengths that already exist in this community, the things that we really appreciate, the things we're doing really well. I think sometimes when we want to implement change, we focus a lot on what we need to do differently. And so there was a real acknowledgement of what an incredibly rich and vital community this really is. And then, we had this wide range of what people wanted to see, and, built in different methods and modalities for how to capture that information and share it with one another.
And I'll just point out here, this thing with the gold in the top right corner, we had a number of these structures that were just really fun structures that my husband built like a Bucky filler dome that you could get in that had padding. And we had all these different kinds of spaces in there so that there was not an expectation that people just came in and sat in chairs all day, but a very multisensory environment that allowed for many different ways of participating and of bodies being in different ways in the space. And something I realized, we don't have a lot of any pictures of it, but a whole side of the space was dedicated for children. And we did a lot of kind of deep work around what does childcare look like in this, and ended up actually with my husband and a good friend, Andy, who sort of took on the childcare piece and really created a whole nother like parallel environment for children to do similar things that we were doing. But they were also present, like you could hear their voices in the space. They were not put in a different room. So that was another big piece that we really worked hard at. I'm not gonna spend a lot of time. Each slide has sort of pictures of the event and then it's a snapshot of some of the artifacts. And so I just share this page. And again, there's a QR code if you're really curious. There was an immense amount of documentation and different forms of like artifacts that were created from within the sessions, but also for them. One of our colleagues made this map, this multi-layered map in the bottom right-hand corner that went through the whole history of development in Easthampton of the arts and culture space. So like layers on layers of when things came and people could add to that. So there were a lot of interactive components. We had a lot of input from the high school and from youth. So there's this thing in the middle is sort of the vision and voice from Easthampton youth. Haley was working with the Council on Aging and had this perspective of wondering about people over 60 and kind of their role and what they were thinking. So we had a lot of other pieces that came in. So just share that to point to that.
Yeah, so this work continued and we started, part of it was a community education piece and thinking about, what are possible futures, and we can really dream and we can really identify what it is we would love to see and identify the structures we felt were necessary in order to make that happen. As I mentioned earlier, there's a real integration of arts and culture throughout the business community, the educational community. And so a lot of what we were learning from our community members and participants was that they wanted to see changes within the infrastructure of the city itself to support arts and cultural events and activities. So there was this also a real integration in terms of the kind of content that was being generated. On a similar note, it's like in addition to childcare, one of the things that were really important to us is we realized what an economic driver this project could be. So we supported local restaurants to cater every one of these sessions. We had our local, beloved popsicle maker bring popsicles in the afternoon. These were long days. We engaged more than 450 community members over 6 months time in all of these various capacities. And so just giving people a place to rest, giving people a time to take a break, a time to move, a time to have a snack, all of these things were really embedded and integrated into everything that we did.
And I'll just point out here in this middle one where there's the triangle, in the back there on these cardboard pyramids, there were questions that we had up at every session too. So we had a lot of input that came into the sessions from previous sessions where we were synthesizing as we went because we didn't have necessarily the same people at every session. But we had input from the community. We had in the library, in the ice cream store, and different places around town, we had built these little pyramid boxes where they were all colorful. People could put their ideas in and respond. We had a survey that was a digital survey that people could respond to. So there were multiple ways of gathering ideas and input. So this was not just the people in the room who were developing ideas. And again, there's just some pictures of the various whiteboards and things that were made just to get a sense of some of the work.
Yeah, and so the third session was really focused on reviewing all of the content that had come in and then really identifying some priorities and, what it is we wanted to see happen, how it was we felt that our city and local resources could work together to support them. And I think this piece was really important. I think that this can sometimes be a missing piece in a process like this. We can generate ideas and then it's possible to become overwhelmed with all of those ideas. And then it's like back to business as usual, and identifying the means by which we wanted to see change be implemented, or the ways in which we wanted to preserve and maintain things we really treasure about this community, was really, really important. And I think creating a space that supported community voices to articulate those things, I think serves a purpose in and of itself. And then altogether, it really served to guide the next very important steps of this process.
One piece that I just want to point out here is that I don't know, you worked with the youth and they had created this mural, which is still up in the downtown area. So this was where the mural was unveiled, and had a lot of themes around intergenerational learning. And so we had here on the left these high school students who were presenting that work. And I think it should be fairly clear from the pictures that joy and play and color and creativity were kind of deeply embedded and part of every session that we had. And so we had music, we had a whole bucket of costumes that people could just put on for fun, and the kids loved that. That's my son in the top right corner. So just to point that out as well. And similarly here, I guess you can see we did a lot of different ways of gathering input. So some traditional kind of dot voting things, but a lot of iteration and a lot of revisiting ideas from multiple perspectives, until we kind of landed on things that felt really clear. And I think I put this picture in just to point out again that these were some of the pyramids, the boxes that we had around town. We had also boxes in the space that had questions like, describe a time when you experienced an event that brought you joy, or a difficult moment, or things like that. So that we were acknowledging also that not everyone likes to have small group conversation or large group conversation. Some people felt more comfortable sharing their ideas on Post-it notes, which were also as integrated in as the voices. So really kind of democratizing, I guess, the input into the work. So then we had this other piece, that kind of an adjacent piece that came in and was sort of designed to support this project. But at Dpict, we do graphic facilitation and kind of visual and physical environments, creative physical environments. And so we decided to host a 5-day intensive workshop in September, with the idea being that people would come to that workshop and actually learn how to build these knowledge-rich environments. So we, tripled our hands and minds that were participating in the actual construction of the built environment. So you can see down below that bottom right corner, sort of the empty ballroom, gives you a sense of the scale. It's huge. And then we actually designed and thought about the space, about the knowledge we were working with, how we might present it. And so we had people learning and then actually constructing furniture, as you can see, with power tools, which Alicia led, and she always travels with power tools. So we had a lot of fun building things. And then that was so that group helped create this environment, which is this was the celebration in September.
Yeah, and this was just incredible. We had taken a few-month break to synthesize all of the information that had come through all these various channels and from the first 3 sessions, and invited the entire community to come in and learn and hear, what happened through this synthesis and what was generated. And we'll talk a little bit and show you some examples. but we have four, and so this is, you can see we're under the blanket fort, we're around the campfire, and this was the context in which it was presented. But we generated what we call 4 through lines. And these were themes that surfaced through every session, through every question. And we felt that it was important that they, in and of themselves, were not a goal or a strategy separate from anything else. So that what came were 4 through lines, 5 goals, and 16 strategies. And these through lines had to be considered within every single goal and every single strategy. I think this is really, really important. We all acknowledged internally that the acknowledgement of these things, the conscientiousness around environmental sustainability, diversity, equity, and inclusion, intergenerational engagement, and history and legacy here in the city of Easthampton do not necessarily happen if we are not making the choice to ensure that they happen. And so baked into every next decision that we've made at Easthampton City Arts, these are our guidelines, these are the directives. And so in addition to these through lines, there were 5 goals and 16 strategies. 4 of those 16 strategies were carried over from the first master plan, which I think is also a really interesting thing. We had all of the deliverables from the city's first master plan in the room with us at one point, and we had everybody kind of vote on which of, there were many things we had accomplished. And then there were a number of things we hadn't accomplished. And some of those things weren't really relevant anymore and didn't really make sense in terms of the direction of the city anymore. But there were 4 things that we said, yes, we need to bring them forth into this next chapter. And so some of those visions that people wanted to see, these are examples. We have a poet laureate program. She presented work this last fall in the supermarket. These here, we started a new event called Easthampton Porch Fest, which bringing elders in Easthampton and new arrivals to Easthampton in community together is really important. The person here in the center of this picture, this is the same porch, and this is her family. This is her mom. This is the same family's porch. And these 2 people are the people who came to us and wanted to start Porch Fest. We started an artist residence program here in this building. And then COVID happened, and this has really stood up through a pandemic, transforming outdoor spaces into a musical venue and performance space. And we painted polka dots. It's called the Spotlight, and people could be distanced and enjoy live music and art in the presence of one another. And as I mentioned earlier, we do a what is the flavor of poetry contest every year. And this was this year's winner with the owner of the ice cream shop. But these are just some examples of ways that we've been able to implement a lot of what came out of the Easthampton Futures Project. But what each of these things has done is we're engaging communities that we might not have been engaging before, and we're deepening the impact that we're able to have in our community.
One of the, Pasqualina is going to read this poem just to close us out here, but just to give us some context to this. This was a collaborative poem that was developed in live at the September celebration session. You want to share some more about that?
Yeah, so Easthampton City Arts, as I mentioned, we have a poet laureate program, and the poet laureate at the time was Maria Jose Jimenez, and they invited 2 other local poets to join them in creating a live poem within the celebration space. So underneath the blanket fort, there were 3 poets for 6 hours that day, wandering around, gleaning, listening to the little tidbits of conversations that people had as they shared and as they responded to what they were learning. And so then there was a pause, they grouped, they, pulled their notes, and together they created this beautiful poem that was read in the space as a closing to this, not just that day, but this entire process. And I am going to read it. It's really beautiful. It's very meaningful. There were many tears and feelings, deep feelings in the room. But to have everyone's experience be affirmed and reflected back with this continues to be very powerful. So, who wove these blankets square by square, and with what intention, in each crochet hooked, pulled, given perhaps to a loved one? Look, listen, feel, and receive. Every word you utter matters, and the marks you leave behind make this space. What does this space mean to you? Whose land was this? Who lived here? Who lives here now? Who is present? Who is missing? Whose voices will we hear and listen to for the 3, the 4, the 5, the next 10 years, the next 100 years? What do you not want to lose? Does it seem like there's a strategy? A treasure map to a better world is possible. Chapters in a master plan, fiddle bows waving. Take my house and your house on Pecumtuck land and become part of a community that dances. What does it mean to weave our steps together for the heart of this community to move in an ageless dance where all are welcome? What can we undo to do? The foundation is here, surrounded by constructive compassion with heart and muscle and design. In 2040, will we be disparate things, voices? My head grazes the roof of a canopy of neighbors, all part of a community that arts together as one beating heart. I fold in half and fold in half again. This is how we weave our will into one. We are the shapes that should not fit together, obtuse and acute, like silk flowers by the door, and poets and police officers and a mayor sitting under a blanket fort. What do you remember? What will remember you?